Okay, hello everybody, greetings from Jerusalem. I'm very happy that you are joining our live broadcast from Jerusalem on this special day. We congratulate all the fathers, and we really hope that the biblical story we have chosen for this broadcast and a very special Jerusalem's location will add to the very special atmosphere of this day and would make it even more meaningful for you. Now, I would ask you to share your thoughts and comments and reflections, whichever you feel comfortable in the comments. We'll be very grateful and very happy to see your comments. Feel free to ask any questions. We promise to get back and answer all of those. And now we would be very curious if there are people among you who joined our previous broadcast, if there are those advanced students among you this time. And if so, please say hello, tell us where you're watching us from, and we'll see it in the comments. Now, for a quick orientation, I brought this map, which will give you a better understanding of the site we'll be focusing on. Okay, so here you can see the outline of the old city walls of Jerusalem. Okay, and you can see that this is actually the historical heart of the city. Now you can see that the city is actually surrounded on all sides by very deep natural valleys. Okay, so previous time we focused on the Kidron Valley, which is to the west of Jerusalem. And this time we are skipping to the east of the old city. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the Kidron Valley, which is right behind me. Okay, I hope you can really see how very impressive and deep the valley is, being the natural eastern boundary of Jerusalem through all the historical time periods. I hope you can see the Temple Mount wall, the eastern wall of the Temple Mount, looming over us to our left side. Okay, so this is actually the Temple Mount, the structure that was built by King Herod some 2,000 years ago, and amazingly enough, right, a noteworthy fact, the structure, this protective wall, it was built some 2,000 years ago, is still very much in use, right, because this wall today serves as the city wall. Now, what really stands out in this specific section is this beautiful gate. I hope you can see, the sun is right in front of us, so it's not very easy to see, but I hope you are able to see the sealed double portals of the eastern gate of the Temple Mount, which is known as the Golden Gate. And I'm more than sure that there are people among you, right, who are already having those flashbacks, right, and all these events, right, from the Christian tradition are coming to your mind, very significant area. So if there are advanced students among us, so please write in the comments which are two very important events that Christian tradition commemorates here at the Golden Gate of the Temple Mount. A hint for you, one event has to do with Jesus himself, and yet another event has to do with Peter, the apostle. Okay, so I don't think you need any hints. Again, last time I learned that we're talking about really advanced audience, right? Very well read in Bible. So write in the comments which are those two events that are connected to the Golden Gate, or the beautiful gate of the Temple Mount. And while you're writing those comments, or quickly looking up in the Bible, right, what I'm talking about, okay, I want to bring your attention to the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount. Right, it's seen beautifully here, right? So this corner is known in Christian tradition as being the pinnacle. Okay, now the pinnacle is actually commemorating a very important tradition which has to do with the temptation of Jesus. As you can remember, there was several stages, right? So stage number one, this was the temptation that took place for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. And now the second stage, which is relevant for us, takes place in the holy city of Jerusalem. Okay, so now I'm reading you from Matthew chapter 4, verse 5. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning ye, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, it is also written, do not put Lord your God to the test. Okay, so Christian tradition commemorates this place as the place where this event is happening, and you can clearly understand, right, how this tradition was placed here, right? You can see the difference in heights, right? You can see that southwestern corner of the Temple Mount faces the riverbed of the Kidron Valley, right? Even today, the height is very much impressive, or the depth, if you like, right? But you understand that the natural valley fills in all the time, okay? So in the times of Jesus, you should imagine the Kidron Valley being even much more deeper, or even deeper than what we see today, okay? So to the left of us are the walls of the Temple Mount, the old city of Jerusalem. Okay, we're in the middle, we're in the Kidron Valley. In a couple of minutes I will take you all the way down into the riverbed, but I want you to have a quick look to the right, okay, on this beautiful ridge in the Mount of Olives. A very significant place here in Jerusalem, a must-see for anybody who visits Jerusalem. This impressive ridge that stands some 3,000 feet tall, which protects Jerusalem, the city. So almost you can imagine as the Mount of Olives, right, as being a protective wall that shields Jerusalem from all the negative influences of the Judean desert, which is right behind the Mount of Olives. And you know that there is a very special relationship which exists between the Mount of Olives, the Judean desert, and the city, the holy city of Jerusalem. Okay? Now, Mount of Olives is very deeply rooted in Christian tradition. Many important events and the events that has to do with the last days of Jesus here in Jerusalem happened here on the Mount of Olives. Right behind me you can see the most ancient Jewish cemetery, the largest one, right? The cemetery that is active, you know, from the Middle Bronze Age and up to this day. This is an active burial site, okay? And we will now follow this trail that would lead us into the riverbed of the Kidron Valley. Please follow me. I wonder if there were comments about the Golden Gate. Okay, yes, I can see that there were people who answered this question, right? So we are really talking about Jesus probably entering through the Golden Gate, right? Entering Jerusalem through the Golden Gate on Palm Sunday, okay? And yet another tradition that has to do with the Golden Gate is the tradition about Peter healing the lame at the Golden or the Beautiful Gate, okay? So we're starting to gradually go down into the riverbed of the Kidron Valley, okay? And given the high hills on both sides of the valley, you understand that the water, right, the rainwater, actually brings all the soil from those hills. It washes the soil down, and that's how, right, those natural fillings are all being brought down into the valley, and that's how the ground level gradually rises through the historical time periods, okay? So again, the depth is quite impressive even today, but the original bedrock lies, you know, some 30 or even 40 feet deeper, okay? So we're going down. You can see the tombs of the Jewish cemetery on the left. And that already tells you that from the ancient times and up to this day, Mount of Olives has always been a preferable burial site for the residents of Jerusalem. And it had to do with a very deeply rooted tradition about the resurrection of the dead, which is believed to start on the Mount of Olives. And who doesn't want to be among the first to be resurrected? Okay, so from the ancient times and up to these days, people are getting buried and ready to pay huge sums of money to be buried on the Mount of Olives. And as many important locations in Jerusalem, the Kidron Valley as well has several names. So another two names that are mentioned in the Bible are the King's Valley. Okay, and it makes much sense since the eastern slope of the city of David, right, this historical heart of Jerusalem, this very hill on which Jerusalem was born as the city, right, this eastern slope goes all the way down to the Kidron Valley. Okay, this Gihon spring, which is the reason why people first settled on this hill, right? The Gihon spring actually flows quite close to the Kidron Valley, okay, quite close to the riverbed of the Kidron Valley. Okay, so when Solomon speaks about King's Gardens, right, the secret garden of his in the Song of Songs, okay, so you should really picture this garden to be situated right here, where the waters of Kidron are flowing, where the waters of Gihon are flowing, okay, and this is where the King's Garden was flourishing. Now I hope you had a chance to see the olive trees that are to our right. Okay, that reminds you why Mount of Olives is called Mount of Olives. Okay, so this gives you an idea, right? Or helps you to imagine how this King's Garden would look like. Okay, so yet another name of the Kidron Valley that is mentioned is the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And now if you will go back to the book of Joel the prophet, okay, he will be talking about the end of days and the last judgment. Okay, and he will tell you how God will be sitting on his throne and judging all the nations, right? All the nations would come up to Jerusalem, would come up to the Kidron Valley, and the last judgment would take place here in Jerusalem in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which, by the way, literally means Jehovah will judge, right, in the future tense. Now, little by little, right, you can see this amazing monument coming to our site, and this is the reason that we're making this broadcast from this location on Father's Day. Okay, so for 2 millennia, this site is known by everybody as being the tomb of Absalom, or the pillar of Absalom. Now, who was Absalom? Now, to remind ourselves, we need about this biblical figure, we need to go back to Samuel 2, chapters 13 through 18. We won't read all of it. This is a lot of information, right? He gets a lot of space in terms of biblical narrative, which is interesting, right? That already tells you that his story is important enough to learn. Okay, so Absalom was the son of King David, the third son of King David. An interesting one, I would say. The name literally means the father of peace, which I guess can attest, right, to the high aspirations King David had for this specific son. It also, many times I feel like Absalom had this feelings of entitlement because he was actually the only son of King David who had royal blood on both sides. For his mother was a princess of Geshur, which is a kingdom to the north of the Sea of Galilee, and he had this feelings of entitlement, right? He was number 3. But we can clearly see that his aspirations was to be number 1. Okay, now you know that in those days, it was absolutely normal for men to have multiple wives, even more so if we're talking about the king. Okay, so you know that King David had many wives, which means that his family today, what we'll call it, blended family, a very modern way of looking on the family, and you know, it's just amazing, right? How we can relate, right, to this troublesome family, even can even say broken family of King David, because this is not an easy thing to manage a blended family, right? When we have many wives and many half brothers and half sisters, and this is how the story starts. Right, we know very little, we know nothing about the upbringing of Absalom, about his early years of childhood, and the story starts by telling us that Absalom used to have a full sister named Tamar, who was really beautiful, and by the way, Absalom was striking beautiful. And I must tell you, the moment you read in the Bible that certain person, right, when Bible talks about the looks, that a certain person is beautiful, you should know that the trouble is right around the corner. Try to think of some biblical figures, right, that it was explicitly said about them that they were handsome, they were beautiful. What biblical figures are coming up to your mind? Write us in the comments. Write us in the comments. I must tell you that usually, right, or at least number 1, right, that comes up to my mind would be Joseph, the son of Jacob. Well, oh, he was a handsome man, right? As said explicitly in the Bible that he was a handsome man, and he got in trouble, right? The wife of his Egyptian patron had a crush on him, and since he didn't give up to her, right, he found himself in the prison, very deep in the pit. Okay, so the moment 2 Samuel tells me Tamar was beautiful and Absalom was beautiful, I know that it's going to be a trouble, and trouble is an understatement. Okay, so Amnon, another son of King David, lusts after Tamar, his half sister. He plots. Right, he makes a plan, right? He tricks her, and he gets her alone, and he rapes her. Okay, an awful story, a terrible sin, really painful, and Bible is very explicit about what is happening there. And Absalom is playing a good brother. Okay, he protects his sister. He takes her in, and who is missing out of this picture is King David, the father. Apparently he was upset, right? But King David is not acting, right, in the way we would expect him to. Okay, he is absent. Okay, and I guess this is where the seeds of discontent were planted, right, in this relationship between a father and a son, Absalom and King David. Now, it takes Absalom 2 years, right? He makes a plan and he executes this plan in 2 years, exclamation mark, right? And he kills Amnon, he avenges his sister's dishonor, and he flees the country so not to be punished for this matter. Now I'm fast forwarding this, right? After a course of several events, as he is deceiving and he is manipulating people, right? Absalom comes back to Jerusalem, and he is even accepted back at the court of King David, right? He is excellent in manipulating people. But we understand that he didn't let go of his animosity against his father, right? His anger, his frustration with his father. And we understand that the worst is yet is yet to come. Okay, and what happens next is that Absalom creates to himself an image, right, of the next best king, right? And he's there present at the city gate, and he rides an amazing chariot, and he creates a small army of himself, everything to win the hearts of the Israelites. And he's very good at it, okay? That's what Bible tells us. He wins the hearts of Israelites, okay? And he goes to Hebron to proclaim himself a king. And he has a lot of supporters, and the word comes to David here in Jerusalem. And this is where we want to pick this story up. Okay, so we're in 2 Samuel chapter 15, and I'm reading from verse 14. David said to all his courtiers who were with him in Jerusalem, "Let us flee at once, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must get away quickly, or he will soon overtake us and bring down disaster upon us and put the city to the sword." And King David leaves Jerusalem. King David flees Jerusalem, his capital city. He was the one to proclaim Jerusalem the capital. Jerusalem is the symbol of his united kingdom. Jerusalem is the project of his lifetime. He leaves the city behind. He leaves the Ark of the Covenant behind. The elderly king, right? King David in his 60s, after so many years of service, right? The man who knew so many battles. He never fled his enemies. But this is a very different type of battle. This is a very different type of enemy. This is his son who betrayed him. This is his son that he's fleeing from, okay? And Bible tells us, right, that King David crosses Kidron, right? You can imagine King David walking barefoot right here, right, through the Kidron Valley, crossing Kidron Valley, climbing the Mount of Olives, so to go to the wilderness. Absalom enters the city, a self-proclaimed king, but he didn't stop there, right? He will now humiliate his father in front of everybody, right? In David's palace, sleeping with his concubines on the rooftop. And then he will send his army to chase his father in the desert. And now imagine, right? There are these two armies facing each other, right, or getting ready for the battle, but this is not just yet another battle, right, of King David. This is a father and a son. And as King David is standing at the city gate, and he's watching his army leaving the city, right, what is he thinking about? Would he ever be able to sit on his throne again? How it all went so wrong, what he did wrong, and apparently he made many mistakes. He wasn't an ideal father. But no, apparently this is not what he's preoccupied with, right? How do I know? Because the last words, right, or the last request that King David has for his generals as they're leaving the city with the army is like this, saying, "Deal gently with my boy Absalom for my sake." He only thinks about his son, whom he loves dearly, despite everything that happened, right? He loves his son dearly, and he only thinks about his well-being, okay? Now, the battle would happen in the tribal allotment of Ephraim, which is to the north of Jerusalem, and King David's army would be victorious, and the battle would spread to the forest of Ephraim, and this is where David's army is chasing Absalom through, okay, through this forest. Now, I guess you remember this is a very popular depiction of Absalom having very rich hair, very curly hair. So as he rides on his mule through the forest, his hair gets caught in the branches of the trees, and the mule carries on, yeah, it goes on under him, and Absalom was left hanging in between the earth, right, and the heavens. Okay, and that's how Joab and his men are finding him. You remember the request? Deal gently with my boy Absalom. So what Joab is doing? He is taking not one dart, not one spear, he takes 3. Forget the word of the king. I will deal with it on my own way. Okay, and he kills Absalom, a brutal death, a brutal way to die. And now we have this messenger, which is running from the battlefield to King David to bring the good news. Which are the good news? We won the battle, right? You can go back to Jerusalem. You can sit on your throne again. Jerusalem is yours, right? And the messenger arrives, and King David is there at the city gate. But what's the question? The first question he asks, what about my son, Absalom? And on hearing the terrible news that Absalom is dead, right, King David is so deeply moved, right? He is trembling. He starts crying. And he goes inside, right? And he's not greeting his people, right? His warriors coming back from the field. And some generals would say, this is a disgrace. They fought for you. Come and greet them. And many would say, this is David being weak. And I'm saying this is one of the most powerful depictions of fatherly love. Not for the sake of Absalom, not for the sake of Absalom right doing. We all know Absalom did wrong, very wrong, right? But for the sake and on the basis of father's love. And Jewish sages would say, this story is not so much the story of Absalom and David, or it's not only the story of Absalom the son and David the father. This is the story of me and you being Absalom, not you guys, you're all right, me being Absalom, the rebellious son, and God being the loving father. There is, if there are those relationships of father and son and loving father, there is no guilt, no shame, no judgment, just love. And that's why we decided to have this broadcast on the Father's Day from this very special location in Jerusalem. Because again, I'm standing right here, right next to this monument, which is known for everybody as being the Absalom's tomb, right? And this is based on the very last verse, right, which kind of sums up, right, the life story of Absalom. So it goes like this. This is chapter 18, and I'm reading from verse 18. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken the pillar which is in the valley of the king and set it up for himself. For he said, I have no son to keep my name alive. He had named the pillar after himself, and it has been called Absalom's monument to this day. Now how amazing it is that there is a monument in Jerusalem, right? The Bible tells you this monument in Jerusalem is called Absalom's monument up to this day. And this is absolutely true. Okay? Now, all was good until archaeologists came to this site. Right? You all know that archaeology is relatively new science, right? We're talking about 19th century as the time when the scientific approach started to develop and to build itself. Okay, so the first archaeologists coming to this site immediately noticed several elements, right, which I want you to see right now. I guess you don't have much background in archaeology or ancient architecture, but even you will feel familiar, right, with the elements that I will be pointing to. Okay, so as we're looking on this whole monument, I must tell you the tallest, the most intact the most intact, the best preserved monument of this Petra of Jerusalem. We have several monuments like this. Okay, so this one is standing some 60 feet tall. Okay, so pay attention that the lower part, right, and I'm talking about this cubical structure. Okay, so this was hewn out of the bedrock, right? You can still see the bedrock on the left side. Okay, you can clearly see the signs of cutting on the rock's face. Okay, so imagine that this cubical structure was hewn out of this rock. And now, as we're looking on the architectural elements on this lower part, cubical part, right, you can clearly see the columns. Okay, and it reminds you of ancient Greece, right? We're talking about ancient Greek architecture. You know, there are three classical orders in Greek architecture. So this one is called Ionic order, right? You have these columns and you have the capitals, which is a typical Ionic capitals. Okay, stepped podium leads to this cubical structure. Then we have a protruding cornice, okay, which archaeologists and historians and architects know to be an Egyptian or typical Egyptian cornice. Now, this cubical structure, right, this lower part of this tomb is actually the burial chamber. Okay, if we'll look inside it, right, we will find something like that. Let me show you the picture. Okay, while I'm looking for the picture, make sure to share this broadcast and sign up for Israel Pack. Okay, so if we'll look inside this structure, we'll see a tiny rock-cut room with a stone shelves on which the body would be laid. Okay, open burial. It would be left like this for 1 year, and as the body decomposes, right, the family would come back, the flesh disappears, right, the family would come back, gather the bones, and put them into the ossuaries, okay, which is kind of a stone chest, okay, where the bones of the deceased would be preserved. Okay, so we're talking about family burial, right? You can clearly see several ossuaries sitting in the niches, right, that were prepared for this purpose. Okay, and just to give you an idea, right, of how an ossuary looks. Okay, so have a look on my picture. Yes, it gets spooky. Okay, so the length of this stone chest would normally be the length of the thigh bone, which is the longest bone in the human body. Okay, and the width would be the width of the pelvis, which is the widest bone in a human's body. Okay, so this is how it was done. Now, this is very different from everything we know about burial grounds and burial tombs in the First Temple period. Okay, all that we covered in a previous virtual tour, we talked a lot, right, about how burial tombs looked like in the First Temple period. So we know to tell that this one is nothing like that. Okay, so based on the architectural design, right, and all the styles, right, that are combined here, and we're talking about Greek and Egyptian and local styles, architectural styles. Okay, archaeologists are actually dating this structure to the 1st century CE. Okay, 1st century of the Common Era, meaning more or less, right, the times of Jesus as he was walking here, right, and you know that he crossed the Kidron Valley several times. He would certainly see, right, this monument. Back then, all the monuments were whitewashed, so imagine what a stunning view it used to be. Okay, now an interesting thing here to be mentioned is the fact that this monument has actually two two parts. So if the lower cubical part is rock hewn, okay, rock cut, right, cut from a solid rock, local limestone, as you can see. Okay, so the upper part, look up from the cornice, right? The upper part is built, right? You can clearly see bad building blocks, beautifully cut and beautifully fitted to each other, but we're talking about building blocks, okay? Then you have a drum, and then this beautiful conical roof, okay? What we're missing, but again, I have a picture which will give you an idea, okay? On the very top of this conical roof used to sit a lotus flower, okay? So this is absolutely a grandeur monument, right? An amazing and a very elaborate monument which only a very wealthy person would be able to afford. Now, an interesting thing is that this monument sits the closest to the Temple Mount, right? The proximity to the Temple Mount is absolutely amazing. Now, the funny thing is that, you know, when someone builds a monument like this, right, as we read about Absalom, which was the initial idea, right, the aim of building a monument here, to preserve the memory, right, to preserve the name. And what are we missing here? You're right, we're missing the name. Okay? So the person who built this, right, was such a prominent figure. His identity was well known to everybody, right? And known not only in his own generation, but also in the following generations. There was no need even, right, to put any type of inscription telling us, right, this is who is buried here, or this is the family to whom, right, which burial ground belongs. And this is absolutely amazing, right, because with the time, this knowledge was lost. How come? I need to remind you that in year 70, 1st century of the Common Era, Jerusalem would be conquered and ruined by the Romans. Okay, so this very dramatic event, right, and the dispersion of Jewish people that followed, they actually made a bridge in this chain of generations, if you like, right, and the knowledge was lost. And here you can see how little by little all these traditions start to develop, right? Because again, anybody who comes to Jerusalem and walks through the Kidron Valley and sees this beautiful monument, right? And who knows his Bible, there is no question for him. This is Absalom's tomb. And just to give you an idea how real, right, this attribution felt for people who visited Jerusalem for 2 millennia. I'll tell you about a tradition that, Jerusalem custom, if you like, that developed here through the years. Okay, I'll show you the picture. So this is a drawing from the 17th century, which shows you people stoning Absalom's tomb. Okay, so we have several historical sources, right, written sources that are telling us that Jerusalemites would bring their kids, their rebellious sons, right, and would make them throw stones on Absalom's tomb, right, telling the story of the son who dared to raise his hand against his father and the poor fate that he met. Okay, what do you say about this pedagogical experience? Now, we'll now ask Rabbi Shimon of Israel Pack to demonstrate how it is done. Get a stone, Rabbi Shimon. He's not sure what to do. Okay, get a stone. Okay, this is how it should be done. Okay, you know, when in Rome, do like the Romans do. Okay, come on, Rabbi Shimon. No, you should stone Absalom's tomb. You missed it. Yeah, go, Rabbi Shimon. Okay, this is how it should be done, right? Again, because this is the punishment. By the way, I'm holding this box of Israel pack. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Thank you. This is the punishment. This is the punishment for the rebellious son, right? He should be stoned. He should be stoned, okay? Now, you're hearing me telling you this custom and you're looking this tomb exposed, right? Not too many stones around, right? You don't see any heaps of stones around. So you're guessing there were not too many rebellious kids or naughty kids here in Jerusalem, but you're very wrong, okay? Because apparently the tomb was exposed during the archaeological dig, and I want to show you the picture and you won't believe it, okay? This is a picture from the late 19th century. Can you see Absalom's tomb being almost half covered with stones that naughty kids of Jerusalem right, were throwing, so not to follow into the steps, right, of Absalom, King David's rebellious son. As we're talking about archaeological research, you need to remember that from 1948 to 1967, Jerusalem was a divided city, meaning everything that you know about Berlin being a divided city, this was the reality in Jerusalem. Massive concrete walls right in the middle, was running right in the middle of the city. All this area, right, the old city, right, all these areas that are sitting inside the walls of the old city, the Kidron Valley, all the eastern parts of Jerusalem, for 19 years they were ruled by the Jordanians, okay? So no serious archaeological research was done in these years, okay? So when we're talking about serious wide-scale archaeological research of this area, the Kidron Valley, and again, this is just one of the many monuments, right, and burial tombs that we have here in the Kidron Valley. Okay, so we're talking about late 60s, right? 1967 is the Six-Day War, right, when Jerusalem would be reunited under Israeli control, and this is when all the major archaeological digs would start in Jerusalem, okay, including the archaeological research of this area, okay? I hope this answers your question about when the discovery was made, right? Or how archaeologists actually came, right, to this understanding that we're talking about a monument that was erected here some 1,000 years later, right? 1,000 years after the death of Absalom. But again, if you will go back to the biblical narrative, right, and you will read carefully, you will see as Absalom was killed there in the forest of Ephraim, he was actually deprived all kind of royal bearing, right? He was killed there and he was buried there with a huge heap of stones above his grave, and this is it. Okay, so several suggestions were made on who was the one to erect this monument. Okay, the most plausible one, right, the one that I really feel comfortable about, right, is the theory that was suggested in 2013 by Gabriel Barcaí, right, which is a renowned archaeologist and an authority in everything that has to do with biblical archaeology. So he suggested this is actually the tomb of King Agrippa the first, right, which is the grandson of King Herod, and that explains you know, the monument, right, how grand it is, and the proximity to the Temple Mount, right, and the fact that there's no inscription, because again, everybody knew that this is the burial ground of the king himself. Okay, I hope very much that this answers. Another question.
Yeah. How safe to walk?
How safe it is to walk? I love this question. It is asked not only about the Kidron Valley, it is asked about walking anywhere in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is very safe in general. It's even funny, you know, it's like I will be walking with tourists, you know, from all over the world, and at some point they would say, especially Americans, right, they would say, you know what? I feel here much safer than in New York City. Okay, so I know that the covering, right, that Israel is getting is very much different, and that's why it is so important to come to Israel and see it and feel it, right, and explore it by yourself. Okay, this area is very friendly, tourist friendly, right? You can see how many explanations, right, we have here, right? All you have maps, right? You have verses from the Bible. You have pictures like this one. Okay, we're bringing you closer. Okay, it gives you, in short, the story of Absalom, right? Here is the picture. You have a verse from the Bible, gives you the understanding. Okay, here is a suggested route with all the major attractions. You can easily navigate. It's always good to have a guide with you, but I encourage you, if you're the person, right, who is more up to traveling and exploring this area by yourselves, you're more than welcome to do it here. It's very friendly and it's very easily done. It's like 10 minutes walk away from the old city. Very close. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be here. We'll be happy to get your feedbacks on this tour and answer any other questions that will arise. I promise to relate to those. Thank you.
We have another question.